What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Sunday Wrap here with No Cap Space. Tyler and Andrew holding it down here for you today. Folks, the playoffs are solidifying and the takes are still coming through. And of course, there's been a couple things that have gone on with Angel Reese since the last time you've heard from Andrew. And Andrew's been the talk of the timeline today with this piece from NoCapSpaceWV.com. So if you're a subscriber,
well, better or worse, I guess.
You've probably already checked that out, but we got plenty to talk about today on the Sunday Wrap. The Sparks keep their playoffs hopes alive. The Indiana Fever have clinched their spot in the playoffs. And where do we feel Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky stand after her suspension? That takes place here later this evening. We'll be leading into that game. But before we dive into any of this, a shout out to our very lovely friends at Home Field, where you can use code NOCAP15 and get 15% off your first purchase, and go and check out the No Cap Space collection personally curated by us here at No Cap Space. Look, if your football team is 1-0, you should go buy some Home Field merch to celebrate. If your football team is 0-1, first off, can't relate. Second off, go and try and get yourself together. Try and help boost the morale. And if you're not a football fan, you got to get ready now because basketball season is on the way. Regardless, no matter where you stand, if you're here, Home Field should be your next destination where you can use code NOCAP15 to get 15% off your first purchase. I'm happy with that, Reed. Okay, let's get rolling, man. I'm in a good mood. It's been a good day of basketball. And with that basketball, we're going to start with the game that just finished, Andrew, and a team that we have disagreed upon pretty much the entire season. And that is the LA Sparks. We're going to talk about the Fever next, and then we will get to Angel Reese here at the end of the show. But let's start off with the Sparks, because today, with their win over the Dallas Wings, they keep their playoff hopes alive. They're like a step above flatlining when it comes to their playoff lives right now. As we get deeper into the season, and they still remain 2 games back from the 8th seed and the Seattle Storm. Right now, and we kind of talked about this before, and I think really until we get a finalization of that last 8 seed, even though it's certainly looking like Seattle is going to be able to hold on to that last place, for better or for worse, with everything that they got going on and their inconsistency. But the LA Sparks has been, again, a team that we have disagreed upon with the trade of the lottery pick that could have been Dominique Malonga to go and get Kelsey Plum. How do we gauge success for the LA Sparks this year is an interesting question, and a question I feel like we might disagree upon again. What a surprise with this team right now. But the LA Sparks, Andrew, if they miss the playoffs, after obviously you have your rookies coming in, you're trying to work them back in and get them to a place where they can lead this franchise going forward, in Rickea Jackson and Cam Brink, and even a player like Ray Burrell, for example, some of these younger players. Does missing the playoffs, can that still be considered a success for this season?
I think if you miss playoff qualification by a game, I don't really think it constitutes a failure for Lynn Roberts and this team. To be honest, I mean, I think if you look back at where they were at the start of the year, going 5-13, you're 8 games under 500 as we're kind of rounding the corner into June. It felt like you were DOA anyway. And then you go on this really nice run post All-Star break. It gets a little bit flimsier with Cam Brink's health kind of going in and out. But the fact that you're still in the mix here, in spite of recent losses, it's a big deal. I mean, the Wings easily could have capitalized on a team in LA that maybe wasn't super focused or super confident that they could still make it. But I think that loss by Seattle and the Storm's inevitable game, their finale against the Golden State Valkyries, who look just red hot right now, it opens the door. I mean, and I like this for LA because you have to get through Phoenix and Las Vegas to get there. So if you make it, it shows you've got the mettle to make it, because it involves you beating 2 of the top 4 teams and having to hope that Golden State defeats Seattle in the process. LA holds the tiebreaker head-to-head over the Storm. So if they end up in a situation where both are 22-22, it's going to be LA, and the Storm end up missing the playoffs, which would be a catastrophic failure for that franchise.
Yeah, massive.
But I think that in hindsight, your take has aged better than mine. I think trading away the pick, not the golf The Scotty Scheffler.
No, don't stop. Go ahead. Keep going. Go ahead. Keep talking, Andrew. Go ahead.
It aged better because if we're watching what Dominique Malonga has done in Seattle this year, it's hard to argue that you shouldn't have had that person there in the front court, right? The issue is, how would that have worked with Cam Brink from a keys to the franchise perspective? Because if Cam Brink comes back and has the inconsistent, back end of the year that she does, while Dominique Malonga looks like a 6 woman of the year contender as a rookie, you probably have some tougher questions to answer as a franchise if you're LA. And by trading away the pick and bringing Kelsey Plum in, you avoided having to answer that question. You signaled that you very much care about having Cam Brink be the person to lead this franchise in the front court moving forward. And so I don't necessarily think that it was wrong to do this, especially when you're already in sort of a weird place in terms of where you are as a franchise anyway. You've got Rickea Jackson, you've got Cam Brink, but you also have De'Arica Hamby. You have Azurá Stevens. Like, you have these players that are stars over the age of 28. So bringing in Kelsey Plum doesn't necessarily mean that you are punting on the early or trying to win now. It just means that you're trying to bridge the eras. And I know that's what you are not about. Yours is either tank and rebuild or go all in, don't live in this in between. And I think I like where LA is at in terms of establishing a couple of things. One, in getting Kelsey Plum, you open the door for the possibility of being able to retain her in free agency. And LA, in spite of their location, in spite of everything that Los Angeles offers as a market and as a city, the Sparks haven't ever really been that place where you are getting top line free agents, because they still train at El Camino Community College. They still rent out Crypto.com Arena. Like, they are not a franchise that owns their means of production in the same way that Golden State or Las Vegas or New York do, right? And so I don't think it's a failure necessarily. I think you are probably left wanting a little bit. I think there are some things that if you are Eli Horowitz, the general manager, you'll go to Lynn Roberts and say, like, these are some things we need to fix. It's very obvious they need a backup big and rim protector. And frankly, you need a defensive stopper at the guard position. And that's a position I would attack in the draft, because as great as Kelsey Plum can be on the offensive end, she's a bit of a turnstile, as is De'Arica Hamby, as can Azurá Stevens be at times, even though she's shown proficiency in her shot blocking this season. They have holes on that end of the ball, and that's what's killed them this year. So I don't think it's a failure. I think it's probably disappointing given what you wanted. But when you actually dig into the fact that they didn't get a full season of Cam Brink this year, I think there is a piece of me that's like, let's wait and see. If you lose out by 1 game as the 9 seed after being a lottery team last year, I feel like there's enough optimism there that you can feel like you're going to be okay moving forward.
Yeah, I think for me, it gets to a thing where I'm not honestly very far off from where you stand in this, in the sense of, I didn't think, if you make the trade again, which I disagree with the trade of Joni and Malone, because I think the questions that you bring up would be asked, but frankly, those sound like great problems to have to me. Like, oh no, we have 2 potentially generational bigs in the WNBA. Like, I'm not hurting if I'm having to ask myself that question if I'm the LA Sparks. It's a question and you would have to figure it out. But there's worse questions to have to ask yourself as franchise. There's a couple of franchise that have a couple of worse questions that they're having to ask themselves right now. I can think of a couple, and certainly one we're going to talk about here later on in the show. But to me, I think it's a larger failure in the sense of, again, I'm not very far off from where you stand. I think, especially with the way that they started the season and being able to get this back together, and really from the moment that like Rickea came back full time, obviously she kind of had like the personal stuff and like kind of the weird stuff off the court. It seemed like we never really got a full answer for that, and like what was going on. So whatever was happening early on in the season, where she was kind of in and out of games, once she came back from that and turned into the Rickea Jackson that we've seen, especially in the back half of the season, there's a whole lot to like about what LA has going forward, even if they do miss the playoffs. But I do think from like a solely individual season perspective, if you're going and trading that number 2 pick, I just don't think anyone thought that Golden State would be in the mix here. frankly, like when you were projecting this out preseason, and that's to me is what that's the LA spot. Pretty much every other team that's in the playoffs, the order is different than maybe I expected, but just about anybody else is pretty much where I expected them to be in terms of who was in the top 8 besides Golden State, and that's where the LA that's where that would come in there. And so I think for me, not making the playoffs when you do make it's still a win now move because you are neglecting the idea of building around a Malonga type player, but it wasn't a championship win now move. I was not expecting this team to go and win a championship by trading for Kelsey Plum, but to me, it still is a win now move. So to not make the playoffs, and even if you're just going and getting that experience in that first round for your players that are younger, for your Rakias, for your Cameron Brinks, players like that, that to me is important. And also, like if you are trying to go and do this again next year and essentially run this team back. As you mentioned, trying to sign Kelsey Plum in free agency. Lord knows what the league's going to look like in terms of free agents and whatnot by the time by the time we step on a court again next season, whenever that is, if it's a lockout or not. But I'm a little bit more disappointed than I think where you're standing with it. But ultimately, I'm not super far off. Because of the turnaround they've had and how great the flashes have been, especially from Rakia. I think this season is really where I'm holding a lot of positivity towards this LA team right now.
When I think too, the other component with Lynn Roberts is that there were a lot of conversations at the start of the year about how well is she going to work with Rakia Jackson. And at the start of the year, there were questions about, is this going to fit with these two, or is this oil and water, like an elite mid-range shooter with someone who cares a lot about prioritizing perimeter shots and shots inside the circle? It clearly has worked. They have figured it out. The issue now is they just need a stronger defensive strategy, and you have to get a defensive specializing two guard to be able to take the primary assignment. And if KP does decide to come back, kind of shield her a little bit. I think the places where you are going to need positions, if you're LA, is defensive stopping, rim protecting center, defensive stopper at the 2-guard spot. And maybe if you go back into the 2025 draft, like picking Sarah Ashley Barker over Aaliyah Nye, for instance, may be like the pick that you wish you had back. There's, crazy what if there where they were a pick away from Sanaya Rivers, and like, what would Sanaya Rivers have done with this team and how much she would have helped. But if you go and look at what they're stepping into in the next draft, there are a lot of really good guards that are high level defenders. And you have so much offensive firepower. I think you can have somebody that you can consider a bit more of a project on the offensive end as long as they are a very strong defender. And that's where, to be honest, like, I could see like a Raven Johnson being great on this team, like a pure facilitator who will clamp people defensively and do the role and everything that you need her to do. Raven Johnson's got that kind of box office appeal to her, just from a look and a social media background component. She carries all of the, Gamecock faithful with her. So I will say, although the trade, isn't great in hindsight, I do think that LA has set themselves up for future success and establish themselves as a place where free agents have some degree of interest to go, which is more than you can say about what they were even 2 years ago, when you would have put them in the tier with Dallas and Chicago as places that were just not conducive to success if you were a high-level WNBA player. I think they have changed the perception there with or without the playoffs, which is good. And then, I'm sure we'll segue into Indiana right now. Kind of the same deal. I mean, Indiana has completely reestablished themselves now, especially in the wake of Caitlin Clark not being healthy this season, as a place where you want to go if you want to compete. And 2 or 3 years ago, you might as well have, put lamb's blood on the door of the Indiana Fever team facility like it was Moses in Egypt. I mean, to let everyone know that you'll die if you go into this.
The Indiana Fever, it was that kind of place they've seen in a minute, realistically. Like, obviously, you've had some very high highs as a franchise, but in terms of consistency, the consistency really you could kind of mark it from like the moment Kelsey Mitchell had entered the league. Like it's like, I mean, it's around that time. Like this is the first level of consistent success that they've seen since they were winning championship with Tamika Catchings. Like it was a very high, and then goodness gracious, since then has it been a whole lot of lows. So as I've had my thoughts in the sense of like, I didn't think that they were going to miss the playoffs. Like I thought that they would probably drop down to that. I expect a little bit more from Seattle, like down the stretch. So I could have seen them dropping down to that 8th seed, but I didn't think they were going to fully miss the playoffs. There certainly, I completely understand the take. You don't got to convince me about the idea of trying to miss the playoffs, but I never thought they would purposely do that. I just like that's not, when you still have Aaliyah Boston, you still have Kelsey Mitchell. That was never going to happen, not with them healthy. And so I didn't expect that, but I mean, truly, a season from hell, injury wise. I mean, I saw like they had like their like we clinched the playoffs graphic. It's the first time I've ever seen an expanded roster for a WNBA team. The Indiana Fever did it before the CBA did, because there's so many players on that graphic. I literally think it's like 15 or 16 players on that graphic of clinching that are technically involved with the team, whether you're hurt or you're a hardship. Like there's so many players on that graphic. And so they did it before the CBA did it. So you could mark that off, another check mark for the Indiana Fever. But it's not one you want to be checking off at all, because it's been such a season from hell. So as much as like the idea of potentially getting a lottery pick, right, and going after, even if you're at the back of the lottery, there's certainly a lot of appeal to that. And there's plenty of cases I can make for what that could have done for the future of the Fever. But I do think that you make a great point in the sense of you're going into this free agency, and you just proved that even without Caitlin, right, and even without any guards for a long portion of this season, you still have a place that you can go and win basketball games. Again, is it to the level and expectation that you expected before this season? No, we thought this was going to be a championship contending team. And had they been healthy, I think that we would have more than likely seen them in that top 4 and would have been, and that would have been the expectation being met. And you have this now, even through all the trials and tribulations, you're still a playoff team. And I think that goes a long way with where the Fever have been able to gain a lot of respect, I think, across the WNBA.
I think Kelsey Mitchell made a first-team All-WNBA case in the last 3-4 weeks. I know the play, like the scoring, hasn't necessarily been there. 10 points today, 14 points in that loss against Golden State at the end of the month, 12 points against LA a couple games prior. But this team simply is not here without her.
Yeah.
Without what she does on the defensive side of the ball, without the games where they needed her to shoot. I mean, if you think about that Connecticut Sun game, the 99-93 overtime win in which she puts 38 down, most of which were in the second half, you can make a good argument that performance probably saved the season for them.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise you're carrying a 5-game losing streak into that matchup against Seattle. You beat LA by 1 at the very, very bitter end of that matchup. And to be honest, that was a huge, that was a huge win. Odyssey Sims hitting that jumper was massive. And I also want to say, this is a massive win for Amber Cox, the GM of this team. Sorry, these are the types of situations that lay bare who knows how to assess talent and who's been around long enough to know where the talent is in free agency. And, all season long, and really for more than this season, we've been talking about Odyssey Sims is that why is she not on a full-time roster?
Yeah.
Type of player. Like, why is she not sticking with the Wings? Why is she not sticking with the Sparks? And sometimes the best GMs are the people that see the things that like we as untrained analysts see. Like, I'm not a general manager. I didn't hoop at this level. Like, I don't know what they are looking at. I interview them to find out, but I myself, I have my idea about how things are. But at the end of the day, compared to them, I don't know shit.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that we can see that appear to be obvious.
Right.
That people in the game sometimes overthink. And Odyssey Sims, and Ari McDonald too, for that matter, was a situation of don't overthink it. Know that they've put together success at every stop and sign them. and see where it goes.
Yeah.
And whether it's been Airy, whether it's been Sid Colson in certain spots, whether it's been Odyssey Sims, whether it's been KK
Ariel
Timpson,
Powers was almost the leading scorer. Yeah, leading scorer today.
You know, and all of that wrapped up in a nice bow of Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston, I think is, you know, really it shows you that this organization has turned a corner into becoming a well-run organization. My biggest concern last year was that they were going to suffer the type of situation that so many WNBA franchises have suffered before them, which is you waste a generational talent by just not being good, you know? Yeah. And Indiana understood the assignment from day one, from jump. Indiana understood the assignment of what they had and said, we are not going to mess this up. They went and overhauled their front office this year. They brought in Steph White. And for whatever anybody wants to say about Steph White from a scheme perspective, she coaches effort. And that's a thing that when you end up in a situation where players are falling left and right due to injury, you need a coach that is going to preach effort every single day. Natalie Nakase has done the same thing at Golden State. And it's why those two plus Carl Smesko in Atlanta are probably in the coach of the year race. You know, it's actually a pretty crowded field this year. I'd say Natalie's a front runner, but like Steph White deserves a measure of credit for this. You know, I mean, this is the replacements. This is like the misfits coming together and managing to still make a playoff run. And what I think it does is it also establishes a floor for the culture of your building and your franchise. Because what this tells me now, what it tells your fan base and what it tells everybody around you is that this team is what we've always believed it to be, which is more than Caitlin Clark. But it also lays bare just how much more it is than Caitlin Clark. It is, you cannot win a championship with this group without Caitlin, but you can get to the playoffs without Caitlin. And to me, I think that's extremely important that these players know that they all have the goods, but when Caitlin is on the floor, they see exactly how much higher they can go. And that to me feels positive. That to me feels like something that you can build on from a locker room perspective and a chemistry perspective. And also you've done it without the specter of, you know, bad faith national media popping in. You know, I don't agree often with Rachel Demita on a lot of things, but I thought her video this week talking about how Stephen A. Smith and the national media apparatus, who spent so much time talking about how much the WNBA needs to be covered beyond Caitlin Clark, how quiet they've been since Caitlin has left. And while I think there is an interesting hypocrisy to point out in that concept, I also think that did Indiana a little good this year because you got the media circus away because Caitlin's been hurt. And what that allows is for you to just play ball, for you to get to know each other and get to know your teammates. And it's not all done under the shadow of your franchise being under the most microscopic of microscopes, right? Yeah. So I just feel like this and Golden State to me are two of the best team stories in the league this year. Golden State, obviously, for the obvious, right? Because Valhalla is awesome. You know, they have built up a fan base in year one. Natalie Nakase has done an incredible job. It's like, you know, it's Goonies never say die, right? And then Indiana has dealt with all of these injuries and managed to get themselves to a certain point. I mean, it's cool. This is the type of stuff that we want to see and like to see in this league. And it makes me really optimistic for what this franchise is going to look like when Caitlin comes back. Yeah, no, they've set like a definitive floor, which I wasn't, I don't know if before the season that I would have been confident in where that floor would have, like if you told me that this is the way this season goes, I don't know where I would have landed on that in terms of like where that floor truly was. So I mean, there's a whole lot to be excited about from the Indiana Fever franchise, from a lot of these franchises. But there's a couple franchises. I hate to transition this way, but there's a couple franchises. One particularly in the line of fire, if you will, of the dialogue that are not as well run, have a history of not being as well run. And of course, I'm talking about the Chicago Sky. Andrew. Well, here we go. So here's where we stand.
I almost want to do like a full recap of everything, but goodness, so much has happened in such a short amount of time. So
do the full
we're
recap because do the spark notes because like the context that we're gonna add here is important.
Yes.
It's important to know how we got here before we add all the other stuff.
Yes, and feel free to jump in as I go here because frankly, folks, if you've been under a rock, there's a lot. So feel free to jump in, Andrew, as I go. Let's start off with the Chicago Tribune article, which really kind of actually, I think we should start off a little bit backwards because there was a moment earlier this season where GM Jeff Pagliocca essentially, for lack of a better term, called out Angel in the media, like and to kind of just put it bluntly. And so that to me sets the table for all of this. Now, when that happened, it was kind of like that's weird, but nothing really followed in the immediacy. And so like frankly, I had really thought about it again. Like it had happened. It certainly like it was in the back of my mind, but it was not something that was actively there. But to me, that all sets the table for what goes down in the Chicago Tribune article, which notably, and when we initially did our video, because we've been covering this the entire way up until this game today, which leads to an Angel Reese suspension, but we'll work our way there. Initially, when we made our video, we didn't know the exact context of this interview. In terms of did Angel or her team reach out to the Chicago Tribune to set this up, and was this a private thing? Like we didn't know any of that. It wasn't. It was literally your everyday media availability. The Chicago Sky like team personnel were there, present, listening to the interview, and this article comes out. There was no like in terms of like I also thought I saw some stuff, and I think it's a fair thought of like, was this article released too early from like an editorial side from the Chicago Tribune? Like, was it supposed to not come out till later? Had that been more of a private interview? That's not the case. This was all there, all normal, everything clear. Within that, Angel calls out everybody, pretty much, and from the organization side, in terms of facilities and all like everything you could think of, from Tyler Marsh wanting just to be coach harder, from Jeff Pagliocca and the roster moves, and Courtney Vandersloot, I think was probably the player that probably got hit the most, and we'll get to that, in terms of essentially saying that Courtney, at her age, coming off a torn ACL, like is not the player you want to rely on as your starting point guard. And frankly, I didn't think she said anything wrong. If you disagree with the messaging, if you disagree with the wording, if you disagree with saying it out loud like this, I completely understand. But in terms of just the pure facts of the facts and where my opinions lie on everything, I don't feel like she said a single thing incorrect or wrong. So then we get to the Front Office Sports article, and we get kind of these anonymous sources and everything that are essentially just knocking all of this behavior and saying that there's stuff behind the scenes where they had talked about it. There was a team meeting organized and how this would even potentially impact Angel's future in the WNBA of sorts, of like people judging her off the court antics, which made it sound way worse knowing what some of the WNBA players have done. And really, I mean, you look across any sports league and knowing what players have done, whether it be committing crimes or scandals or Lord knows, it's like to word it like that was frankly wild to me, from an anonymous source, especially not standing on it either, not publicly. So we get that, and then Angel Reese apologized in the press conference, and to me at this moment she was like, I apologize to the team, like it's not how I wanted that to come off. Like it seemed at this point this was done. It felt like this was it. Like certainly there was stuff to talk about in the offseason, but in terms of the public eye and what we were getting in this chapter of this saga, it was done. And then we get the statement from the Chicago Sky. I want to pull up this exact statement because I think the wording of it is incredibly interesting here, from everything about it. And to me, first off, I'll read the statement. The Chicago Sky values the safety, respect, and well-being of every player. We are committed to accountability so our players can stay focused on playing basketball. Because the statement's detrimental to the team made by Angel Reese during the league-mandated media, she will not play in the first half of the game on September 7th against the Las Vegas Aces. This matter has been handled and resolved internally, and we are moving forward as a team. So, one thing we didn't hit on, was me and Shawnee reacted very emergency-like. One thing we didn't hit on was really that first paragraph, because that is really crazy to me. Once I kind of like sat down and like, okay, I got a second to really think about it. The Chicago Sky values the safety, respect, and well-being of every player. Where was that threatened? Like I don't, unless it was something along the lines of like social media comments or things like that. Like to me, like that's the only thing I can come up with to try and, if I'm trying just to, from a most like Chicago Sky organizational perspective, how can you rationalize the safety being threatened? That's the only thing I could possibly think of. And even then, we haven't seen the Chicago Sky stand up for anything on social media at all over the course of Angel Reese's tenure as a player there. So like, now is an interesting time to do that. But obviously that game is happening tonight, like literally about to tip off here shortly. This first half punishment is unheard of in the WNBA. This does not happen. This isn't like college football where you see, okay, you're not starting the game because you missed class. This doesn't happen in the pros like this. This doesn't happen. And frankly, seems like an incredible like showing of what the Chicago Sky organization are. That's pretty much where we stand. And now we await to see what happens in today's game. If there's anything else, if we hear from Angel after the game, that's where we stand. Whew, okay, now to get into our actual dialogue on this. Andrew, you had a masterful article dropped today. You called the ISO on nocastbasewb.com, and you have been the talk of the town. My good man, you have been the talk of the town on Twitter. So make sure you're tapped in to nocastbasewb.com and our socials so you're not missing anything because, goodness, Andrew, we haven't had you on here on the YouTube since the very initial aspect of this with the Chicago Tribune article. Again, make sure you guys check out the whole article on the links in the description below. Go check out the whole article because there's a whole lot here and there's a whole lot of historical aspects. And Andrew, I'm sure you're going to hit on some of that as well. But just, I'm letting you call the ISO once again, my good man. You did it great the first time. Run it back. There you have the whole context, everybody. Andrew, where do we stand between Chicago Sky and Angel Reese?
It's over. I don't see a situation in which this gets fixed. And the reason I don't see a situation in which this gets fixed is everything within the Sky's historical context tells you that the organization from ownership, from Michael Alter all the way down, values the sum of the parts greater than the individuals. And this has been the case with Sylvia Fowles. This has been the case with Elena Delle Donne. This has been the case with Candace Parker. Curiously, the only person who it doesn't seem to be the case for is Courtney Vandersloot. And whatever individual components have happened over the course of this year, and I know that a statement that I made in our post-game video from Vegas got shared around the internet a little bit, discussing and alluding to the fact that there is some background involved between Angel and Sloot. Disagreements stem from culture stuff. I mean, when you are talking about a team that won a championship with effectively this core, if you will, this James Wade, Jeff Pagliocca, Courtney Vandersloot, Allie Quigley core, and the lesson learned from that year was this is how you build a champion. And Michael Alter, the owner of this franchise, who had been waiting over a decade to get there, once he gets there, I have a hard time imagining that you don't put your faith in the people that got that for you after all that time. And I wrote last week in 5 Out that this situation proves that everybody is right and everybody is wrong all at the same time. And it still feels that way. It still feels that Angel Reese is right and wrong. Jeff Pagliocca is right and wrong. Courtney Vandersloot is right and wrong. I'll start with Angel because obviously she is the person that this all stems from in terms of the commentary around her. But I think I wrote in the story, and there's some disagreement in it, and that's fine. A column is not meant for everyone to agree with it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a column. Like the writing in this is it's designed to have a take, and if you agree with it, you agree with it, and if you don't, you don't. But that's what column writing is, right? And within this column, my belief is that Angel Reese, honestly, reminds me a lot of Kim Mulkey, her coach at LSU. Kim Mulkey and Angel Reese are hyper-competitive people that are very successful, that are well-known among their teammates as being people that you can kind of get along with, but have no problem telling you what they think or what they feel about how things should go. They are loyal and potentially stubborn sometimes to a fault, and they have a propensity to occasionally step in it with their public statements. And that's not necessarily like an issue. I mean, who among us hasn't done that sort of thing? obviously when you're a professional and the price of your fame and fortune is life in the public eye, you end up having to live with your statements being under a microscope. And when you are a 23-year-old Black woman, the way Angel Reese is, you are subject to a level of scrutiny that somebody like Kim Mulkey is not receiving by virtue of the color of her skin, the age that she is, and the type of times that we are currently living in. At the same time, I said this with Dejanay Carrington in Dallas and why the move to Minnesota worked. Passionate people sometimes have a hard time in incompetence and in dysfunction, because people in dysfunction and dysfunctional workplaces, whether or not it is something in the private sector or something in the world of professional sports, incompetence is able to thrive because incompetent people listen to incompetent people, and people become entrenched in their positions and they believe that their way is right, even though somebody can come in from the outside and see that it's wrong. And the skill that you learn as an adult is having to make people feel like you are getting them to do what you want them to do and making them feel like it's their idea, right?
Mhm.
I talk to people a lot about this in local television all the time. When I have people that are working as sports directors in local sports departments like I used to do. And I tell them that the biggest thing is not managing down. It's not managing your coworkers. It's not managing the people that are under you on your team. It is managing up. The biggest challenge in life, in every workplace, is managing up. And where Angel Reese still has room to grow as an individual is to manage upwards. How to manage her coaches, how to manage her general managers, how to manage her front office. And at 23 years old, it's totally okay to be not adept at that yet. The way that professional athletes have kind of turned this whole world inside out, where authenticity is frowned upon and being human is a problem because you are now a brand and you have to do everything so sterilized and nobody gets upset about anything. We've almost forgot what it looks like when an athlete comes out and just tells the shit like it is, And the issue that I had with firing Teresa Weatherspoon, and I know that I had some mentions from people, saying that this one particular quote in the column was problematic, was, in saying that in getting rid of Spoon, they got rid of one of the only people that was able to get through to Angel. Getting through to Angel, I will defend the choice of words, because it's not about whether or not you can steer a person in a proper direction. The best managers are the people that understand how to validate their subordinates, but also be able to guide them in a direction that gets them away from their worst impulses. And Angel Reese's worst impulses are occasionally putting her foot in her mouth with the press and out in public. This is a situation where it could have waited till an exit interview, but it didn't. And here we are. Nothing she said was wrong about this. And so you can look at things, with regard to Angel, where two things can be true at once here. You can say Angel should have waited. And, maybe if there was somebody in the building that listened to her, that was able to validate her while also saying, I understand your point and where you are coming from, but this is not the way to handle it. Then you maybe have a likelier situation where Angel is able to figure it out until you get to the end of the season. But everything that we have seen this year indicates to me that nobody in the building appears to be listening to her, appears to be validating what she has to say, while also holding her accountable in saying, as valid as your opinions might be, there's a middle ground here that we need to work towards. And that's where we get to Jeff Pagliocca. Because Jeff Pagliocca, in how he is talked about, in how he carries himself in public appearances, I do not know the man personally. I have not had interactions with him, but what in writing this column, it is amazing how much publicly available information there is on Jeff and how he grew into the role that he is in now. And when you are someone like him, where your career starts as a JV boys basketball coach at a high school, and you figure out a way to be able to be a player development coach for NBA and WNBA stars, and something you're doing is right, and it affirms your worldview that what you are doing is right and what you believe is right, I could absolutely imagine you ending up in a position where you don't feel like anyone can tell you shit, because you won a championship, you've developed these players, you've built your own business and done it all from the ground up, from absolutely nothing. And there is a stubbornness that can occur when people are that type of self-made. And it is not very hard for me to envision a scenario like the one I laid out in the column, which is you have a man who is very convinced in his way of doing things and how his way of doing things will lead to success. And you have a person on the other end who sees it differently. And in Jeff's world, clearly the idea is you have to be the person to do what I say because my way is the way that works. And the relationship between him and Courtney Vandersloot appears to be such that Courtney Vandersloot is the mouthpiece in the locker room for what Jeff Pagliocca wants. And you end up with that more often than you think, right? You end up with this all the time. Like, there are people that align with management and there's people that don't align with management. This is normal office dynamics. It's just being played out in a very public sphere. And while I understand anybody who doesn't feel like they can empathize or sympathize with Angel here because of the public commentary that appeared to go at her teammates, I do not think that this is a situation where you can divorce the context that led us here, because Angel knows about everything that has happened in Chicago in the last decade. She has had professionals in this league tell her about the problems she has had. Angel is online. Doubtless she has seen the comments by Courtney Williams and Gabby Williams and Candace Parker and Elena Delle Donne and all of these other stars that have fled the sky alleging mismanagement and problematic aspects to how that organization handles its business. And so for me, I think that people can be valid in where they're all at. Courtney Vandersloot can be valid in this idea that, like, I'm a champion. I know what I'm doing. I know how to build a franchise. I'm a Hall of Fame player. Why am I letting a 23-year-old dictate this when I have the pelts on the wall and the rings on my hand to be the one to tell you and guide you into a place where we win? I can absolutely see Jeff Pagliocca's the validity of where he feels he is in thinking that he helped build the title team that James Wade had and thus is entitled to the ability to build out the team as he sees fit, and even though people can say it was he could have gotten more for the Kalia Copper trade, I do think going from 0 picks to 2 picks that become Camila Cardoso and Angel Reese, it's good GMing. It is, and then on top of that, you end up with Angel Reese, who is equally as valid, who is not used to losing, who has had, mind you, 3 coaches in her career to this point that are known for telling it exactly like it is. Brenda Frese in Maryland, Kim Mulkey at LSU, Teresa Weatherspoon at Chicago. It is not surprising to me at all that she wants and responds to a coach that is able to match the energy she is at. The same way it appears Dejanay Carrington works pretty damn well with Cheryl Reeve and worked pretty well with Stephanie White. 2 coaches that'll tell you what it is and tell it like it is, right? And so everybody here is valid in their emotion and how they feel. The problem is Chicago is the one whose reputation precedes it. Angel Reese has a perception problem with the occasional stepping of it in the press, but she's not wrong in her assessments of the organization. Everybody who is looking at this organization can see the same thing. They can see that Courtney Vandersloot at 36 years old was not a number 1 option for this team, especially after the prior 2 years in New York. Everyone can see that, Rachel Bannerman, Ariel Atkins is not enough. Everybody can see that maybe you didn't need Kennedy Carter back because of just the slow drip of exhaustion that Kennedy Carter can occasionally bring to a franchise. You needed a scorer and you let it go to Saudi Arabia. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to be a genius to see this stuff. And so I think that everyone's right, everyone's wrong. At the same time, Angel Reese to me is the person that I think has the most validity, even if she did not go about it in a way that we are used to. And yes, this was a hugely egregious mistake to do this in a press scrum before a game and not in an exit interview. There was a Sky staffer that was present, and I'm not going to crush the comms department because they've got hard enough jobs as it is, but somebody not alerting Pagliuca that these comments had been made, or not alerting the team that is, that was being made, is, it's a failure on the organization's part, because this could have been dealt with in-house before the article even went to print. Because you could have, the way this could have worked, comm staffer goes to Marsh or goes to Pags and says, hey, Angel said this. You get everybody together and you say, look, this stuff is an issue. These are comments that were made, and we got to figure this out before the article goes out so everybody is on the same page. How were you caught unaware that this thing was going to press? I simply don't understand that concept. And then the fact that you had a situation in which another article comes out that takes Angel out of context. And when Angel went to the press conference after and said, I think things were taken out of context, I don't think she was referring to the Trib story. I think she was referring to the front office sports story that, curiously, did name Rachel Banham and Haley Van Lith when they were not previously named in that story, right? And on top of it, I don't like throwing other reporters under the bus, because I do feel like we have to be people that, back one another in a situation where power is on one end and the press is on the other. But that line starts to disappear when press and power start to intermingle. And I don't think it's necessarily surprising that damn near every story that I've read about Jeff Pagliuca while writing this column, all of those background tidbits and information that nobody seemed to realize until this column went out today, it all came from the Sun-Times under the same author. And so I do think there is something on this end where it feels like this is a frustration that has been simmering since the start of the year, that reached a head in which a 23-year-old immaturely said the right things at the wrong time, and the immediate response from the organization was to try and put her in her place. And that is where the story becomes bigger than the commentary. That's where the story becomes a story about the Chicago Sky and not a story about Jeff Pagliuca and Angel Reese. This becomes a story about what has the past 20 years of this organization taught us about how this is likely to end. And for where we are now, I have a hard time seeing how this is going to end in a way where everybody keeps their jobs. I have a very hard time feeling that way. And within the article, I went back and pulled quotes of Michael Alter discussing his loyalty and affinity to Courtney Vandersloot. And that's not how, and that to me is where the big story comes in about Nadia Rawlinson, the co-owner, about Michael Alter, the co-owner, because the people that can hire and fire Jeff Pagliuca are the ones with the money. And if they feel that this is a situation where their loyalty to Courtney Vandersloot or their loyalty to Jeff Pagliuca, or even by proxy to James Wade and anybody associated with him and the people that brought that championship to Chicago over the person that could bring a championship to Chicago in the future, that's a problem. Because whatever people want to say about Angel Reese, if Candace Parker wants to say C-tier player, that's fine. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion about players. It can be respectful, it can be disrespectful, but this is the game. We are here to talk about this component of things. At the same time, you got to be willfully ignorant to not look at Angel Reese and see the ceiling of what she can be if the improvement comes. I comped her to Josh Allen a while back, and I still stand to that, because what we see when we see Angel Reese is a player that has all of the intangibles, but needs to get the tools. And because we don't see players in sports very often get the tools in spite of having the intangibles, it is harder for us to believe it can happen. Every now and then, very rarely in sports, it does. With Josh Allen, it did. With Angel Reese, I think it will. And
so
if you're willing to make that bet, then there is only one place that you can put this down. And I will end on this because the comp that I made, was to the Magic Lakers. And I know a lot of people had an issue with that because the circumstance and context was LA had won a championship already at the time.
I was about to make that exact point. That's where I was about to head.
To me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have anything to do with the circumstances of champion versus not. This is a dynamic of system versus star. And there have been many situations in pro sports over the years where there had been system versus star debates, and some franchises went in one direction and some franchises went in another. Personally, I think Angel Reese has the ceiling to eventually be a top 3 player in this league. And while, yes, the LA Lakers did win a championship in 81, Tragic Johnson was a thing in the press at that time. There were beliefs about whether or not Magic was the
Angel doesn't have Kareem on this roster.
Yeah, Angel does not have.
That's the problem. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, like what is our Kareem equivalent in the league right now? Like Alyssa Thomas, maybe? Like exactly. Like Angel doesn't have a player that's a top 5 player of all time on this roster alongside her. Yeah. And so, yes, LA won a championship and Chicago hasn't. And so, yes, you could argue there's less leverage for Angel as a player and as a winner to make this type of statement and make this type of gesture against the organization in the direction that it's going. But to me, the dynamic is what matters here when it comes to that comparison. The system on one end, Jeff Pagliaca's system that was derived from James Wade versus how Angel feels they have the ability to play and what she feels she needs to be successful. To me, at this point, especially in the sport of basketball, where you can affect the game on 2 different sides and you're one of 5 people on the floor at a time for your team, there is only one correct option here. Because here's the thing, if you get it wrong with Angel, it's fine. You restart it and you start over. But you at least have the perception among people in the WNBA that you backed your player. If you do not do that here, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. Because if you fuck up and you put all of your eggs into the basket of Pagliaca's system and Courtney Vandersloot as the lieutenant, and you don't get this right, nobody is ever coming back to your organization, ever, because they see how you handled Angel Reese. And that is the problem here. And that's where Chicago has only one option and only one way of figuring this out, because the only other option in which everybody succeeds here is if Jeff Pagliaca puts his pride aside and is able to listen to and validate Angel Reese's concerns and say, I hear you and want to listen to you, but I also need you to be someone that's willing to work with me. And Angel needs to set her pride aside and do the same thing. But I don't think we're there anymore, because I think that
very far from that,
to be honest, I think Angel has a very fair and legitimate reason to not feel like there is a salvageable relationship here, because anything that leads to that conclusion, like a copacetic conclusion, feels like it's going to require a bending of the knee. And I don't believe that she should have to do that. I don't think she was wrong in saying it. Timing sucks, but you know what? That message was for the front office. The same way this past weekend in the world of college football, Mike Gundy went after Oregon head coach Dan Lanning for the NIL stuff. That was taken the complete wrong way. Mike Gundy was sending a shot at his donors. He wasn't sending a shot at Oregon. Obviously, Oregon used it as fuel because it's a game that, you're going to take any motivation you can. But the same situation and the same dynamic is happening here. Angel wasn't going after her teammates. Angel was going after the front office and saying the front office and Jeff needs to figure this stuff out. But instead we got focused on the player component and not the broader critique. And that's why we are where we are at this point.
Yeah. I mean, first off, a round of applause for that. Goodness gracious. What an ISO, Andrew. I'm right. I'm step with you on pretty much all of this. I think the biggest thing for me, like, I think to kind of go back a little bit to the championship point before we wrap up here. And in fact, she doesn't have a ring. It's like what everyone keeps. That's been a large critique of all of us, that she doesn't have a ring, right? We're talking different currencies here. First off, we see star players do this all the time without a ring. This is not a new thing across pro sports. Like this is not a new thing by any means when it comes to star players using leverage. Is it new in the WNBA? Like, this doesn't happen in the WNBA. But you want to know why? The currency is different in the WNBA. Because frankly, motion in the WNBA is the biggest currency of all right now. And Angel Reese has motion to go up against anybody right now. And to that point, you've seen champions come and go. They didn't give. The Chicago Sky organization did not give. You've seen these champions come and go. You've seen MVPs come and go, but they didn't have the motion. And we talked about in your article, Andrew, you can see it in nocastbasewwe.com, where you provided the context of, hey, look, yeah, we were winning, but business didn't change when players left. I'm going to tell you right now, Angel Reese walks out that door, business is going to change. Business will absolutely change. There is no doubt in my mind that the business will absolutely change. You will lose money if you lose Angel Reese. This is the PEMDAS here is not very hard. Okay.
This is not Elena Delle Donne.
This is not hard to calculate here. And so that is the only thing to me that, in comparison to EDD leaving, to Ka leaving, you go through the whole list. The thing that makes this so much different is the moment we're in women's basketball, how empowered these players are, especially within a CBA year, and what they are requesting, and rightfully so. But you're dealing with an anomaly. There's only a couple players that could go and do this truly, and Angel Reese is one of them. And you are an organization that has a history of this. You're an organization that has a reputation of being poor, and frankly, everyone knows, deep down, everyone knows Angel Reese is right. And that is what I'm incredibly intrigued to see, how that changes this, because the motion is going to follow. And it's not following the Chicago Sky and that baby blue. It's following wherever Angel Reese goes. And that is what I'm incredibly interested in seeing here.
And I'll end with this. Indiana listened to their star. That's the difference here, right?
Yeah, 100%.
If Caitlin Clark is in Chicago and this shit is still going on, and Caitlin were to react this way, it's not within her character to do so. But if she did, I don't care how much you dislike Angel Reese because the rivalry or what your personal feelings are about how she carries herself. Like, if Caitlin did this for Chicago, Caitlin would be right. And we'd be saying she's right. You know, like, this is not a situation in which Chicago necessarily did right by her, right? And there's a fair argument to be made here that offloading the pick, that pick that ended up becoming Sonia Citron. I think you could argue that the pick and deciding to go in on winning now, you can make a charitable defense of Jeff that part of that was done to appease these two young players and want to win in a way they wanted to win. However, this all seemed to have changed when Courtney Vandersloot came back. And the dialogue around it, from how the ownership and the coaches talked about her role in this team to how she talks about her own role in this team, is one of those things that is a bit of an eyebrow raiser. And to me, feels like an allegiance to a player, an allegiance to loyalty at the expense of what Chicago needs, which is someone who can flip the fucking table. And they don't seem to like people wanting to flip their table, which is a shame because their table needs to be flipped.
Massively.
And that's
desperately bad. Desperately bad. I think that, Andrew, is a great place to end this off. Look, and what's crazy is that there's so much more to hit on. And you did in your article, nocastbasewwe.com. You can find it in the link below in the description. Also, we're gonna be live every night for the playoffs, folks. So if you like this type of dialogue across the board, we're coming. We're on the way. Our playoff-a-thon is on the way, if you will, and we're ready. So make sure you're subscribed here. Hit the bell so you're notified every time we go live, every time we drop a video. Of course, nocastbasewwe.com. You can subscribe for free. You can also get paid additional content. Become a ball knower. Join the chat. We be in there chatting, watching games and whatnot as well. It's a great community on nocastbasewwe.com. And of course, our friends at Home Field. Use code NOCAT15 to get 15% off your very first purchase and get ready for the college season, because we are ready for that as well. We will be here covering it and talking it. We are very excited, and hope you are along to join us across the playoffs and into the college season. Until next time, folks, we'll talk soon.